This ghetto thug, DiJonai Carrington on your screen, she cannot play another WNBA game ever again. This ghetto thug you see on your screen, DiJonai Carrington, posted white privilege and tagged the Indiana Fever after she got ejected after raking Sophie Cunningham across the head.
The first thing viewers see is DiJonai Carrington on screen, just before the moment that would turn an ordinary WNBA matchup into a much bigger controversy. The footage immediately puts the confrontation at the center of attention, because within seconds, the focus shifts to Sophie Cunningham and the contact that sent her down. What made this moment impossible to ignore was not simply that there was physical contact. It was what happened next. Cunningham got back up, the confrontation continued, and Carrington was eventually ejected after officials reviewed the play. The source describes the officials identifying a clear wind-up, significant impact, and follow-through before upgrading the foul to a flagrant-two. And that is where the story starts to change. At first, this looks like a single hard play in the middle of a basketball game. But the reaction surrounding it quickly made the incident much larger. Cunningham did not simply walk away from the moment. She confronted Carrington, while teammates and officials moved in to separate the players. Then came the questions that kept the controversy alive. Was this simply an aggressive play that went too far? Was there intent behind the contact? And why did the aftermath become almost as important as the foul itself? Those questions matter because the ejection was only the first consequence. After the game, Cunningham publicly described how she viewed the incident, while the discussion surrounding Carrington moved beyond the court and into social media. So the real story is not just what happened in those few seconds. It is why those few seconds continued to generate reactions long after the whistle, and how one physical confrontation became the opening chapter of a much bigger controversy. The contact itself happens quickly, but the sequence immediately after it is what makes the moment so tense. Sophie Cunningham is moving toward the basket when DiJonai Carrington makes contact with her. Cunningham goes down, and the play continues long enough for the ball to reach the basket. But the attention is already shifting away from the shot and toward the players involved. Cunningham gets back to her feet almost immediately. And instead of simply walking away, she moves toward Carrington and shoves her. That changes the situation from one disputed play into a confrontation that now has to be separated by the people around them. Teammates rush in as the officials step in and begin sorting through what just happened. The officials then go to the monitor. That review becomes important because the final decision is based on what they see in the replay. According to the source, the officials determined there was a clear wind-up, significant impact, and follow-through, and they upgraded the foul to a flagrant-two. Carrington was then ejected from the game. Notice what that decision does, and what it doesn't do. It establishes the severity of the foul under the official's ruling. It does not, by itself, establish what Carrington intended before making the contact. That distinction becomes important later, because Cunningham would give her own interpretation of the play after the game, while other people involved would describe it differently. So, at this point, the confirmed sequence is straightforward: contact, Cunningham goes down, the confrontation follows, officials review the play, and Carrington is ejected. But the ejection did not end the story. It was actually the moment when the controversy moved into its next phase, and what happened after Carrington left the court would give everyone a completely different reason to keep talking about this incident. The ejection should have been the end of the story. Instead, it was only the beginning. After leaving the game, Carrington reportedly posted the words "white privilege" and tagged the Indiana Fever. That post changed the nature of the controversy almost instantly. What had started as a physical incident on the court was now being discussed through a completely different lens, with people debating what the post meant and why it appeared after the ejection. But there is an important distinction here. The post itself is part of the reported record. What it meant, why it was posted, and whether it was directly connected to the foul are interpretations. The source does not establish Carrington's intent behind the post as a confirmed fact. Cunningham, however, did give her own response. She said the incident had nothing to do with race and pointed to her own history, explaining that she had previously been ejected for a similar type of foul and had accepted that the call against her was deserved. Her position was that there was no reason to bring race into this particular situation. And now the controversy had two completely different layers. There was the basketball question: what exactly happened during the play? And then there was the public question: why did the conversation continue after the whistle, and what did the social media post add to an already heated situation? That distinction matters because the strongest claims circulating around the incident go beyond what can actually be established from the footage or the statements in the source. What can be established is that Carrington was ejected, that the incident generated a post-game social media controversy, and that Cunningham publicly rejected the racial framing presented in the discussion. What cannot simply be assumed is what either player privately intended beyond what they actually said or did. And now the attention turned toward the Indiana Fever. Because once your player is at the center of a controversy like this, the next question is obvious: how does the team respond? That answer would become one of the most debated parts of the entire night. The biggest shift in the story came after the game, when attention turned away from Carrington and toward the Fever bench. Because once a player is ejected for a flagrant-two, the next thing people naturally want to hear is how her opponent's team sees the incident. And Stephanie White's answer immediately became part of the controversy. When asked about the foul on Sophie Cunningham, White described it simply as a hard foul. More importantly, she said, "I don't think that DJ intentionally came out to get her across the neck like she did, but it did happen, and I thought it was the right call." That statement created a very different debate. White was not disputing the official's decision. In fact, she acknowledged that the flagrant-two call was the right one. The disagreement was over intent. While some viewers interpreted the severity of the contact as evidence that the play was deliberate, White said she did not believe Carrington intentionally targeted Cunningham's neck. That is where the reaction became personal. Fans who expected a stronger defense of Cunningham began questioning whether the coach should have been more forceful in supporting her player. But that is an interpretation of White's response, not proof that she failed her team. And the distinction matters. A coach can acknowledge that a foul was serious while still disagreeing with the idea that it was intentional. White's comments did exactly that. She accepted the punishment while rejecting the assumption about motive. But the reaction didn't stop there. Chicago Sky coach Tyler Marsh was also asked about the incident. He said he had not seen the replay and believed Carrington was making a play on the ball, while also saying he would handle the reported social media issue internally. Now both benches were being pulled into the controversy. The original question had been about a single foul. Suddenly, viewers were judging how two coaching staffs responded to it, how much support players were receiving, and whether the post-game comments matched what fans expected from their teams. And there was still another controversy developing on the same night. Because while the conversation was exploding around Cunningham and Carrington, Caitlin Clark was about to become part of the story too. Then the controversy took another turn. While the conversation around Cunningham and Carrington was still unfolding, Caitlin Clark was assessed a technical foul in the third quarter. According to the source, the call came after Clark made contact with an official while being forced out of bounds. It was described as her 8th technical foul of the season, which, under the source's account, would have triggered an automatic one-game suspension. That changed the stakes immediately. This was no longer just a disagreement about one physical play. Now an officiating decision could potentially affect Indiana's next game and remove one of the team's most important players. But Clark's response was noticeably different from the noise surrounding the rest of the night. In her post-game interview, she explained that the official's explanation was that Clark had run into her. Clark said she had already watched the play back and that the league would ultimately decide what should happen. She also made clear that she did not believe the contact was intentional. There was no dramatic accusation from Clark. Instead, she left the decision with the league. And that made the next development even more important. Stephanie White, who had just been at the center of the debate surrounding the Cunningham foul, also acknowledged that Clark's technical was a bad call. Now the controversy had expanded again. First, there was the Carrington foul. Then came the social media fallout. Then the questions about how the coaches responded. And now an officiating decision threatened to create a completely separate consequence for Clark. The league was suddenly being asked to make a decision on more than just one controversial moment. Would the technical stand? Or would the official's decision be overturned before it could affect Indiana's next game? That answer would come from the league office, and it would determine whether this latest controversy ended with a suspension or another reversal. Then came the decision that changed the immediate consequences for Indiana. According to the source, the WNBA reviewed Caitlin Clark's technical foul and ultimately rescinded it a few hours after the game. That meant Clark would not have to serve the automatic one-game suspension that the source associated with reaching 8 technical fouls. For Clark, that was the immediate relief. But for the larger controversy, the decision raised a different question. If the technical foul could be overturned after the league reviewed the footage, what did that say about the original call? The source presents the reversal as evidence that the league recognized the decision needed to be corrected. But it does not establish that every other controversial moment from the game was handled incorrectly. Those are separate questions. The Carrington foul had already been reviewed on the court and upgraded to a flagrant-two. The Clark technical was a different incident, and the league's later decision dealt specifically with that call. Keeping those two situations separate matters because the controversy had started to merge into one larger narrative. By this point, the game had produced multiple flashpoints, a physical foul and ejection, a social media dispute, competing reactions from the coaches, and an officiating decision that was later overturned. And yet the reversal did not erase everything that had happened before it. The questions surrounding the original foul were still there. So were the disagreements over intent, the reaction to Carrington's reported post, and the debate over White's comments. What changed was the ending of one particular controversy. Clark's technical was gone, and the immediate suspension threat disappeared with it. But that left the bigger question hanging over the entire night. When the cameras stop rolling and the league has made its ruling, what should fans actually take away from everything that happened? And that brings the story back to where it started. One physical play turned into an ejection. The ejection was followed by a social media controversy. The controversy then shifted toward the coaches, with fans debating whether Stephanie White's response showed the right level of support for Sophie Cunningham. And while all of that was happening, Caitlin Clark became involved in a separate officiating controversy that ultimately ended with the league rescinding her technical foul. But those events should not automatically be treated as one single conclusion. The foul was reviewed and Carrington was ejected. The reported social media post created another layer of controversy. White publicly disagreed with the assumption that the foul was intentional, and Clark's technical was later overturned. Those are the facts. Everything beyond them, the motives, the meaning behind individual reactions, and whether any of this represents a larger problem inside the league, belongs to interpretation. One moment from the aftermath does, however, show why the conversation about team support became so emotional. When a teammate was asked about stepping in after the confrontation, the answer was simple: just to protect, followed by the explanation that she always has her teammates' back. That response can be viewed alongside White's comments, but it should not be turned into proof of an internal conflict that the source does not establish. And maybe that is the real question left behind by this entire night. Not simply whether one foul was hard enough, or whether one call was eventually overturned. But how should players, coaches, officials, and fans respond when a controversial moment keeps growing after the whistle? The footage gives us the play. The officials gave us their ruling. The players and coaches gave us their reactions. The league gave us its decision on Clark's technical. What remains is how everyone interprets everything in between.